Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wellness Homesteader. My name is Kim, and I'm glad you're joining us today. So I decided that today we would start our Canning 101. And I've thought a lot about the information that I would like to share with you based on questions and feedback that I've gotten. And I've decided that it's probably easier to eat this elephant one bite at a time. So we're going to take small bites. So in case you're wondering why the wall is pink and why I'm sweating, I'm actually out in my garage, and this is where I store a lot of my canning supplies because I don't have a lot of storage space in my kitchen. So wait, don't turn off the video. You may be looking at my two shelves of items and thinking, oh my goodness, if this is what's involved in canning, I don't want to do it. Actually, I want to reassure you, I've been canning for off and on for a number of years. I've accumulated more items than you need to get started. I've also accumulated some things that have been given to me from my family, so I probably have a little bit more than I need. Probably more than we both need together, but at any rate, let's get started and let's just talk about some basic canning principles. And then our video number 2, part 2, we're going to switch and we're going to just talk about one type of canning, which is water bath canning. And we're going to can our pickles that I promised. So just to give you a baseline, there are 2 ways to can food. One is to water bath can. So basically what's involved there is you fill your jar with food, you cover it with water in a certain type of pot, and I'll show you a couple examples of that. You boil that water for X minutes, depending on the type of food and the recipe that you're making. You remove it, and then it seals when the jar cools down. Things that are suitable for water canning are generally acidic, like tomatoes, or high in sugar, like jam. You know I love my jam. Or a combination of the two. So we'll talk a little bit about what's safe to water bath can, what's safe to pressure can. Generally, anything that has meat that's low in sugar or low in acid, so things like soup, stews, most vegetables would have to be pressure canned. So it's the same principle of filling the jar with food, but instead of covering it with water, you would be putting it into a pressure canner. And it's only partially filled with water. Steam or pressure builds up inside that canner. You cook it much longer, as a rule of thumb, sometimes up to 90 minutes, depends on the food that you're making. And then once that steam is allowed to be released or gradually come down, you remove that jar, then it will seal as it cools down. So water bath canning is a great place to start. Even though I have a lot of equipment, I thought I would just run through really quick some of the basic things that you will need if you would like to start with water bath canning. And you're going to be surprised at how many things you already have. So let me also give this disclaimer. It is early August. We're in a pandemic situation where supplies are not what they used to be. So it is nearly impossible right now to find canners, jars that aren't exorbitantly priced, canning lids, rings, things like that are in very short supply. So if you have trouble finding the items that you need, maybe reach out to friends and family that used to can or that currently can, that might have some spare parts, if you will, that you could actually borrow to get started. I'm hoping that towards the very end of canning season, things will ease up a bit. Last year, at close of canning season, that's where I purchased most of my jars, which you see here, because Walmart had them, most of them were half price, so I really stocked up. So plenty of jars, and this doesn't even include the jars that are filled with food in my pantry. Anyway, so let's get started. So I want to show you a couple types of water bath canners, and I'm going to stand up here so you're going to see not my face. So the first type of water bath canner here is an electric water bath canner. So it would be the same as boiling a pot, one of these types of pots, on the stove, except that Ball has created this canner so that you can simply place it on your counter, fill it with water, turn it on. You don't have to lift a heavy canner because it has a spout. So that was one of the reasons that I really wanted, pardon my hand, a Ball electric canner, was simply to save my back, not a requirement. So if you have a large stock pot, I'm gonna reach over here. Something like yay. This will work fine for canning. Now you do need to have a rack or something that will keep the jar from resting right against the bottom. So most canners, oops, should have peeked in here before I started, will have a type of rack. Something like this, that just keeps the jars off the bottom of the pot, pardon me, so that you do not end up breaking the jar because it's right against the heat. If you have the pot and you have a nice thick terry cloth type hand towel, a couple dish towels, that will work fine just to cushion the bottom. So that is the water bath canning. I'm not gonna get real heavy into the pressure canning until we do what I think will be part 3. But this is my pressure canner here. And I do keep it out of my kitchen just, from a storage standpoint, but it has to be cleaned each time I bring it in and out. So one other thing that you will need, that you can still find actually, is you're gonna need a canning tool set. So as you can well imagine, the jars are very hot as you're lifting them in and out. So there are jar lifters. And I have several of these. This is just a very inexpensive one and it works great. I've seen the larger mouthed ones, the ones that are thicker, those work fine too. Whatever you happen to have. I have 3 or 4 of these. I'm not really even sure how I ended up with so many. You're gonna need some type of a funnel. So with the kit, and that's to get the food in the jar, in the hole in the jar, you usually get a plastic funnel, something like this. I personally like the metal funnels. They're long lasting, they're better for the environment. I'm not having hot food against plastic, which I do try to avoid as much as I can. And you can buy these, purchase this set on Amazon. I haven't looked, but I'll try to drop the link below. Still working on my Amazon affiliate account. This has been like a whole thing. Another piece of equipment that you'll need is either a pair of tongs or a magnetic lid lifter. So the lids that go on the jars, if you're packing your food hot, your lids need to be hot as well, and you don't want to stick your fingers into the hot water, so having the magnetic lid lifter is a really great thing. Another piece of equipment that often comes with is something called a debubbler. It looks kind of like a butter knife, and it's what you use to go around the jar to get air bubbles out so you don't have gaps where you have liquid below your food and then food spoilage or unpleasant looking food. I can't find my debubbler. I just use a butter knife. Sometimes I use a chopstick. It just depends. So really, if you can find a basic set, you have a pot, you've got your dish towel or your rack, you're good. So the next thing you're gonna need is you're gonna need some jars. So jars come in all sorts of sizes. For water bath canning, your water bath canner is probably not going to be tall enough to do anything larger than, and the USDA says, don't water bath anything larger than a quart. So let me show you here, a quart jar, your regular quart jar. When I make soups or shelf-stable meals, I will generally use a quart because most of the time I'm only feeding myself. My favorite type of jar is a pint. apologize about the noise. So here's a pint-sized jar, and here's a pint-sized jar. The difference is the size of the mouth. So you can have a regular mouth jar or a wide mouth jar, which requires regular lids and rings or wide mouth lids and rings. So it depends on your preference, what's available. Wide mouth is really nice if you're packing your food, or let's say you're making pickle spears and you want them to be pretty and you want to put pieces of dill in at certain angles. The wide mouth is a lot easier to accomplish that and to arrange your food, if you will. I have far more regular mouth than wide mouth jars, but I do like another thing about the wide mouth is that my hand fits in, so they're a little bit easier to wash, especially if you're not using a dishwasher. From the pint size, you can move down. We have the half pint or jelly jar. There are some other combinations like 3/4 pints, pints and a half. I've got a little bit of everything. And different sizes of pints. So some are taller, some are shorter. These are a little bit shorter, so that's great for something that you're gonna spoon out like a jam. These work really great for jam. So now, even though you see I have all of these items, you're starting to realize I really may have a lot of what I need right on hand to begin doing this. A couple other things, and I'm not gonna get into all the ingredients. I do wanna mention, you will need vinegar. So as you're water bathing or even pressure canning, most of our water supplies, whether you're on a well or whether you're getting city water, have enough minerals in it that it will leave a white film on your jar. And you're also going to need vinegar for recipes like pickles, and you need vinegar to wipe the rims before we put our lids and rings on. So this just says distilled white vinegar. When you go to Walmart or Aldi or wherever you go, you may see two kinds of vinegar, distilled white vinegar, and then you're going to see canning vinegar. And it'll say 5% acidity, canning vinegar. Price point maybe as much as double. Look at the labels. They're exactly the same thing. Well, make sure they're exactly the same thing. 5% acidity vinegar. So don't get pulled in by the word canning necessarily, because the vinegar that is right next to it, that's $1.38 a gallon at Walmart, may work just fine for you. All right, the last thing I want to talk about, you know me and my books. You can go online and find all sorts of recipes for canning, pretty much anything that you can think about canning. A word of caution, and we'll talk about food safety in another part. You do want to make sure that you're canning an approved USDA recipe, or if it's not an approved recipe, that you've done your research and you believe you're canning it in a safe and sanitary method, so that you won't make family sick, because you get really mad when that happens. So every year, just about, Ball will put out a little thin, you can see this is a thin one. You can find these on the shelf. Any grocery, any Walmart will have them. They'll put out a guide to preserving. And this is actually the latest recommendations, and they will change sometimes. One of the most recent changes, I have always boiled my lids and rings, always for 30 plus years that I've canned. Now they say you don't have to do that. I still boil my lids and rings because I feel it's more sanitary. So that change is reflected in a book. If there is a big change to the method or how the USDA has approved it. Ball also puts out almost every year a thicker, complete guide to home preserving. Do you need to buy this every year? Absolutely not. Can you buy them used? Absolutely. I chose to buy both of these new before I really got into some used books, because when I purchased them, it was the height of canning season and I couldn't find a used copy. You can also find non-Ball cookbooks, and I love this Amish canning cookbook. I just, again, another word of caution, and I can recipes out of here. Not everything in here is technically USDA approved. Do your research, do your homework, just make sure that you're canning safely. And then just for fun, I wanted to show y'all something that I found when I was going through my books. This is actually a 1938 Ball Blue Book, preserving book. And my mother recently gave me her cookbook that she, as she likes to say, went to housekeeping with, and it fell out of there. So it's 1938. My mom was born in 35. I'm suspecting this was her mother's canning cookbook. What's interesting about it is it has really cool color pictures. The recipes are kind of odd. And do you notice the jars? It's a bale jar, so not the ring in the lid. It's actually the wire and glass jar. So are these USDA approved recipes? Probably not all of them, honestly, but just a neat piece of memorabilia. So I hope that cleared up the mystery about what do I really need to get started canning. And we are going to work on pickles next. So my next video, we're actually going to do a water bath pickle versus Mrs. Wages. So Mrs. Wages, as you start to can, you'll see she makes a lot of really great mixes that you can use to create sauces and ketchup and pickles and those types of things. And I was, after my pickle debacle, which I shared with you on one of my earlier videos, I have tried both making what they call refrigerator pickles as well as water baths. So we're going to do some of both in case you can't find your canner. At least you can put some pickles up this year. So I look forward to seeing you a little later. A couple days, we will do part 2. We will do our pickles. So have a blessed day, and thank you for joining me. Oh, and don't forget, if you found value in the video, please leave me a comment. Let me know how the video went for you, things that you might like to know, something that you would like me to add to the video. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thanks a lot.